she's probably referring to. Peter, can you clarify the conference presentation example? You probably mentioned it, but I'd love to know, what school district is using if you look at slide 4, using this to measure the portrait of a graduate? Is that Newburyport?
This is going to be either Newburyport or Stacy.
That's us.
It's Stacy.
Selfishly, I'm asking that question because I'd love to follow up with you separately on that one. But yeah, I
Um,
know it's not the agenda today, but
No, 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 no. I mean, connections is the agenda as well. That's always
yeah,
the
no,
agenda.
I
So
appreciate it.
I love it.
so
It-
I would quickly just say, and Carrie, cover your ears, please. We haven't been as faithful as we were when we first started. But when we first built our portrait of a graduate, active communicator and collaborator were our main focus, and we were looking at what does this look like. Matt spent a really long time on like doing look fors and creating like opportunities for students to be active communicator and collaborators. So then when I came in, we did the same thing for different departments, and we really focused in continue with the math work, social studies, and ELA reading. So the PowerPoint that we see here, the way that we tied in active communicator and collaborator was with the activities that we were doing in social studies that were actually also performance tasks that they had created. So we were presenting on how the portrait of a graduate is supposed to tie into what you're doing day to day. But then also how does MCIA and the work that we're doing at MCIA actually align to what does it look like to be a graduate of Milford Public Schools? Does that
Thank
answer
you.
that?
Yeah, so
Feel
it's
free to
more
reach
about
out.
alignment than anything else. I think
Mhm.
I'm hearing. Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
Yes.
and does that align, not to use that word too much, does that align with what you all are working on in Masco?
Yeah, I'd love to make that connection. I mean, I'd even like to get to the point of measurement, but yeah,
Yeah.
no. But yeah, absolutely. I think it helps. I mean, I'm always trying to bring it in. So,
Yeah. I mean,
and I know Newburyport does a good job of that, but yeah, from some of the conferences I've gone to.
yeah, you all have it tied into Portrait of a Graduate, tied into SQM in some places. Is that right, Tom?
We do. We've kind of used it almost like a feedback loop a little bit. Like we'll use the SQM data to say, hey, we have to engage students more, and then we'll leverage the PoG as a pressure point to actually engage students with, some competencies as opposed to just like testing kids. And then
Yeah.
we're hoping to see engagement come, get a little bit better in our SQM data next year. It's the same kind of thing we saw with the vocal data as well. And then to what Carrie Dad said too is we're also trying to tie with the whole move away from MCAS and all that. We're also looking at the performance assessment piece and try to bring all three together in some sort of a clear triumvirate where, hey, portrait of our graduate is our vision. SQM survey data measures our kind of like softer SCL type skills. Performance assessments measure more of our academic skills. And here's our portrait.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we get there. But
Yeah, keep us posted on that.
yeah,
I mean, not only for Newburyport, but and for the districts in this room that are pursuing similar goals, but also like, the of course the competency determination preliminary report came out earlier this week, and I think that depending on how that's implemented, the state could be headed in that direction, hopefully, more in that direction as opposed to the EOC direction. But anyway, Carrie, did I see you on?
Yeah, I guess I was just gonna say like what I heard everybody just say too is like it's about grounding ourselves in something like right. So like we try in Milford to ground ourselves in our portrait of a graduate, and then we try to measure how we're doing with our portrait of a graduate using SQM data, right? And
Hmm.
so it sounds like Newburyport is like constantly coming back to the portrait of a graduate or the different competencies that we want to see the kids kind of meet in terms of their soft skills. I think that that's one of the pieces that like Karen, I think that's why you said like close your ears is like we just don't do well, right? And how do we build the structure and the system so that there is a constant feedback loop so that we're like constantly regrounding in portrait of a graduate if that's what we want to be constantly regrounding in. We were good at it for a period of time, and then like the next hot topic or hot issue kind of came up, and then it gets dropped. Um, which I just think is a cyclical thing in education that is not necessarily good for kids.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I think something that, I sort of agree a little bit with what you said, Kerry, because it was really our vision very strongly district wide for about 2 years. And now really the elementary schools are the ones that kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. But
Mm,
our high school and our middle school have really tied it into like our student conferences. And so that's a way that we're able to kind of keep cycling back to it and using, various data points. So it keeps it within the middle school and the high schools. It's just because we're always cycling back to it. But I do agree that our elementary schools, K-5, I don't know if you ask teachers if they'd still be familiar with it, but it's not as actionable or realized at those levels.
and right. And that gets to a question that I had about like how this conversation about Portrait of a Graduate feeds back into this little document here. It's like if we're trying to create some traction here so that principals can use the SQM data, is Portrait of a Graduate going to be, is that going to be a tie-in? Like, should I have some text in the beginning that says, look, when districts are using SQM in a like robust way, they're using it to measure some aspects of their portrait of a graduate, almost like exactly what you described, Tom. Or, like is that the conversation we just had, is that something that is helpful to import into here?
I don't know if it has to be the portrait of a graduate, but I feel like if
Yeah.
you're trying to measure non-academic mastery, I don't know how, I don't even want to call it soft skills because it's not just soft skills, but if you're trying to measure, I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to measure. Like
Yeah.
then you use portrait of a graduate, and one of the things that you might be trying to measure is I mean, then you use SQM, and one of the things you might be trying to measure is your portrait of a graduate.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's just one tool. Like I don't know that that should be the center of all SQM data usage.
Yeah. Right. 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 We have been anchoring on school improvement plans more specifically than portrait of a graduate. Obviously, these things are related to each other. Um, but anyway, I hear what you're saying is that we don't have to emphasize portrait of graduates so heavily, but we can say, like, folks use SQM to measure socio-emotional learning, the types of behaviors and dispositions. I don't know if these are the exact words either, that lead to academic success and enjoyment in school. Um, Engagement, emotional safety, student-teacher relationships, like these pieces that like I think are essential before academic learning is going to really take off, right? And and maybe having a little bit more guidance for that at the beginning of this document helps people to find their footing with SQM.
And Peter, I think it also depends too. So in Newburyport, we did a whole process, and our three kind of big words were connect, engage, and challenge. So
Yeah,
those are the things we want to see kids doing or failing.
yeah,
So it just so happened, I guess, that SQM measures a couple of those at least that
right.
or we can kind of connect it. So that's how we found it. So I think it just depends on what the portrait looks like in a district, but it can
Yeah,
definitely be used by districts depending on how they're using POG. But I thought we
yeah.
were really making this document smaller, not bigger.
No, that's the other thing.
Keep making it
Well,
bigger.
that goes in another tier, but I think it would definitely be helpful to name it, and because there's not a district out there that doesn't have right a portrait of a learner, and you're going to have overlap.
And now the state has theirs, right? Built on Attleboro's or closely resembling Attleboro's. So, um, ideally SQM could be plugged into that in a more long-term sense for the districts whose portrait of a learner, portrait of a graduate resembles what the state is putting out. That feels like a pretty good touch point for us to have. All right, I'm going to try to capture all of that in here somewhere. But this is why, and for folks who joined late, I apologize. I didn't say that we're recording this, uh, so that all of these fantastic, points that you all are sharing don't get lost in my brain while I'm facilitating. Um,
Peter, can I just add one more thing too that might be
Please.
like really interesting to do, right? Like, so I have not read this huge document yet from the state, but
Yeah.
um in that document is a lot of different like competent, like I guess soft skills, portrait of a graduate type of portrait of a learner competencies, right? And yes, they give us a visual. Like it would be great to be able to explicitly connect how district, like what on SQM could we use to measure those different pieces of a portrait of a graduate? Because we're making an assumption right now that like all districts have portrait of graduate. Portrait of a graduate was hot a few years ago, but I don't know that all districts in Massachusetts definitely have one, right? We're not required to have one by the state or
Mm,
anything like that. So if people don't, and they're going to start to use what the state's putting forward, it would be nice to make an explicit connection.
yeah.
But I
I will
also would
say,
say I have heard the commissioner say like it's not finalized. So I don't know how much work you want to put into it if the portrait of a graduate is not finalized from their perspective.
I know. I mean, we could put in some work based on what they've released, and then there's less work in adjusting it. My home district, Malden, does not have Portrait of a Graduate, but I don't know if we are one of just a few or if there are more. Um, but I mean, if it's not Portrait of a Graduate, there's something. There's something that they're anchoring their work on, right? And we can point out, hey, SQM can be used and should be used to measure these things that can't be measured on tests, but are also extremely important for students' experiences of school. Um, yeah.